Hey everyone, how's it going? Today is Mahler 2 Day, one of my personal favorite excerpts for the double bass. There's something about the key of C minor I think that just hits a little bit harder, you know? Probably why a lot of metal bands play in the key of C minor. Anyway, I digress. Let's jump right in, but not before we pass through our first subscription checkpoint. You may think you're subscribed to the channel already, but you might not be. The good news is that it's free, and it really helps out the channel a lot, so why not? Looking at the beginning here, the very first thing we're confronted with on this excerpt is a lot of information in the first measure. The German phrase here loosely translates to "with quite serious and solemn expression." Wild sort of translates into, well, wild. And we have not one, not two, but three fortes, an accent, and finally a sforzando to cap it all off. Do you think he wanted it to be loud? For the opening on this, I like it to be quite heavy, flat hair, on the string, and a bit closer to the bridge than normal. I also like to put a fairly significant emphasis on the first note, since we have not only the three fortes to contend with, but also an accent and a sforzando to consider as well. So a very strong emphasis on the first note, but not overly long. You still want to convey the wild nature of the gesture, so just be sure that it maintains direction out of that first note and doesn't linger too long. Near the end of bar 4, we have an accello rondo marking. This does allow for some personal subjectivity, but I like to use the first note as somewhat of a setup. Then start the accello rondo on the D, quickly gaining momentum up to the top of the phrase. When I hit that C in bar 5, I like to already have my tempo in mind and set that tempo right from the start of bar 5. It may not be exactly what an orchestra would do with it, but I think for auditions specifically, this gives a committee an immediate sense of your rhythmic integrity, which, coincidentally, is what we're going to talk about next. Oftentimes, when I'm approaching an excerpt for auditions, something I'll consider is why. Why would the committee be asking for this excerpt? Obviously, they want to hear the power and the refinement of your sound, but I think this excerpt also demands a strong rhythmic pulse to be successful. Be very careful to make a clear designation between your triplet rhythms and your duple rhythms. Especially after a set of triplets, it can be easy to sort of tripletize your dotted 8th, 16th rhythms. To help with that, try hearing 1, 2, 3 in your head while practicing to be absolutely sure you're holding for the full value of the dotted 8th note. Aside from the rhythms, there are a ton of very specific details throughout this excerpt. Take special note of which notes are marked staccato and which notes are without. Hold the tenuto quarter notes in bars 6 and 21 for their full value. This is also a great opportunity to make them sing a little bit, as long as they still fit into the serious and solemn expression noted at the beginning. I also think that the dynamics are another reason that orchestras ask for this at auditions. There's so much specificity in the dynamics presented here, so following them as literally as possible is definitely the play here. Also, it's important to remember that the forte piano in bar 25 is within the dynamic of pianissimo, so it doesn't need to be too aggressive. Think of it more as a bow speed accent rather than a bow weight accent. Regarding the octaves in bar 15, I almost always play the upper octave, unless the orchestra specifically requests the lower line. This also allows me to start with my extension open to C for the low Cs on the next line. Then I can close the D gate in bar 20 during the rest so it's ready to go for the low D in bar 30. I like to think of the action of closing the D gate just as rhythmically as I would playing any actual notes. So bearing that in mind, I try to aim to close the D gate on beat 3 and then use the next 2/8 of rest to prep my next entrance. If I don't have an extension, however, I would play bar 30 down the octave and then go up for the D to finish the line. Speaking of dynamics, I like to be sure that I don't crescendo too much too early here at the end. For my own benefit, I actually changed the mezzo forte in bar 33 to a mezzo piano and then put a mezzo forte after the crescendo in bar 34. For me, that leaves enough room to continue growing in the bars that follow, ultimately hitting the fortissimo in bar 37. The notes here are marked staccato, so they do need to be short. I like to think of these notes as very hammer-like though, very powerful and very weighty. Finally, for the tremolo at the end, obviously we start pianissimo and grow to fortissimo just as Mahler marked. I've actually had multiple people tell me in mock auditions in the past that they prefer to hear this get pretty aggressive, so don't be afraid to let it get a little bit dirty. As long as good contact is made with the bow and the sound production doesn't suffer at all, I think you can really go for it here. Also, a quick note on what type of stroke that I like to go for on this. For any 16th notes that are not in the first line, I do like them to be just slightly off the string, especially if they're marked staccato. There are, however, two places I think the 16ths should stay on the string and a bit more connected, and those would be the 16ths in bar 15 and bar 30. The triplet eighths, however, I think work best if the bow stays on the string, particularly in the string crossings. Now, if you've been on my channel for long, you'll likely know that besides focusing on how the excerpt should be played, I'm a really big fan in developing specific ways to practice it. For this excerpt, some strategies I've mentioned before on this channel are going to be really useful here. For example, for any of the moving lines, practicing this with 3 bows per note to start, then 2 bows per note, then as written, is going to ultimately solidify the connection between the right and the left hands, leading to better articulation and better clarity. I also think that, while this is likely going to come as a shock to everybody, I definitely advocate for slow and patient practice on this one. If you focus on the details while practicing it slowly, they will come across as more convincing as you speed it up. Practicing regularly with a metronome as well will solidify the rhythmic switches from the triplet to the duple rhythms, so plan to make liberal use of the metronome as well. Well guys, that's going to do it for this excerpt tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. Be sure to not only give this video a like and subscribe for future content, but also comment down below what excerpt you would like to see me cover next. I hope you're having a fantastic day today, and I do look forward to seeing you in the next video. See ya.